We can light the world up with a word. We can take a nothing day and brighten it up with a tale unheard. 'Cause we're learning and knowing and growing, with welcoming words overflowing. You know it. Come along with me, let's read together. Come along, let's see what's new together. Come join us in the welcome word. Come join us in the welcome word.
Hello, welcome to Welcome Word, our latest episode. Well, you can see I have some very snuggly clothes on today, and there's a reason for that. However, my fireplace is broken, but I do have a picture of a fireplace, and so I know that you listeners have great imaginations. I'm just going to put it right up here, next to the real fireplace, and we'll begin. Today we're going to be talking about mysteries, and for a very good reason. I'm going to introduce you to the Christmas tradition of Icelanders. It's called Jólabókaflóð. Now, this has been going on for quite a long time, but the Icelanders are still celebrating it. In about the 1930s, the people in Iceland were thinking that they were not reading quite enough. So they decided that that the Reykjavik Library Foundation would come up with an idea to entice readers to read during those long, cold winter evenings. So they introduced Jólabókaflóð, which is translated into Christmas Book Flood. Now, a Christmas Book Flood is a tradition where you receive or give books during Christmas Eve. And it was started, and it got to be very popular after World War II, because paper was one of the items that was not rationed during World War II. But right now, it's still a beloved tradition. In September, Icelanders have a book catalog with Iceland's best books, and it's mailed directly into their mailboxes. And the next day, the Icelanders hit their bookstores. I'm going to begin with some mysteries about the younger generation. This is called Miss Nelson is Missing by James Allard. Now, you've heard of the old saying that is, you don't know what you have missed until it's gone. Well, that's true in this case. Miss Nelson teaches first grade, and she has a classroom of mischief makers. She decides one day that she's going to come to the school as a substitute teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. However, Miss Viola Swamp is very strict. And when she walks into the classroom, the children say, "Where's Miss Nelson? Miss Nelson is missing." Well, the children are going to have to figure out what the mystery is. And where is Miss Nelson? Second book for the young readers is called Farm Crimes, Cracking the Case of the Missing Egg. Well, this book begins like any other day on the farm. However, it takes a twist of excitement as Hen runs out of her hen house screaming, "My egg is gone, my egg is gone." Farm animals crowd around her. They know there's only one thing to do, and that's to summon William Van Hoff, the world's greatest and best goat detective. Follow along in the story with Van Hoff and see if you can solve the mystery too. This next book is called Book Scavengers. Now, this book happens to be for a little bit older elementary student. And it begins with Emily, a 12-year-old girl whose family is moving to San Francisco. And Emily is thrilled because her favorite author, Griswold, lives in San Francisco. And he's the author of the Book Scavenger series. Now, one time when he was walking, a bunch of thieves came over him and knocked him down. And poor Griswold ended up in the hospital in a coma. Oh no, thought Emily, how are people going to find their books? You see, books were hidden all over the United States. And to find these books, you had to solve riddles that gave you the answers to clues. This book is engaging, fun, and also you need to be a good thinker. In fact, families together have read this book, solved the puzzles, and found the books. Next, we'll continue with some cozy mysteries. Now, this is a fun mystery book that I found that is different than anything I'd ever read before. It's called Blanche on the Lam. Now, Blanche, in this story, begins in a courtroom where she is being arrested for passing bad checks. She's pretty nervous because she knows if she's found guilty, she might have to spend time in jail. And she's the only breadwinner in her family. She lives with her mother and her niece and nephew. All of a sudden, some great courtroom drama appears, and Blanche is able to quietly escape. Soon, she finds another job. But during that job, there's someone in the household that is murdered. Oh no, thought Blanche. They might say that I did it. So she goes out to solve this mystery herself. There are 4 books about Blanche, and you will love her. Next book I have takes place in southern France. It's called Bruno, Chief of Police. Bruno is the only police officer in his charming little town. He came here to live after World War II. He is not like your regular policeman. He hates carrying guns. He only wants to talk to the lawbreakers. And he also happens to coach the children's tennis and rugby teams. However, one day, a terrible murder occurs. And poor Bruno has to interact with a high-powered team of Paris investigators. Well, Bruno comes through, but it's going to be a twist. This is a great book in that you will not, I don't believe, be able to solve the problem yourself. And good thing about this is there are 16 books in this series. I wish I knew somebody like Bruno, and I think you will too. Last cozy mystery I have is one that's quite recent. It's called The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Now, it happens to be about an affluent retirement community where 4 very unlikely friends make a Thursday murder club because they think everything is rather boring in this community. And they're waiting to hope to solve some crimes. All of a sudden, you got it, there is a murder at Cooper's Chase. It happens to be the builder of Cooper's Chase is murdered. Oh, thought the Thursday Murder Club, now we have our own crime. They are very clever, very quirky, and my favorite character is Joyce. You'll know why when you read the book. There are 2 other books following this book. Now, if you enjoy your mysteries intelligent, character-driven, I have 3 authors that I'd like to introduce you to, and each one of them is going to be their first book in the series. This is Louise Penny. Her first book is Still Life. And the series is about Armand Gamache, who's a Montreal police officer who's called into a small French town in Quebec, and it's called 12 Pines, to help uncover a murder. Well, when Gamache and his colleagues come to 12 Pines, they are met with a very unusual town and a very unusual cast of characters that live in this town. Gamache decides he likes it so much that he and his wife are moving to 12 Pines. And are there mysteries that follow? Louise Penny has just published her 16th Armand Gamache book. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Tana French. Tana French is the author of The Dublin Murder Squad. This is the first book, In the Woods. It takes place in a small suburb of Belfast during the summer. You know how the children were playing and the mothers would come out and call their children home for supper. All the children returned except for 3. When the police went into the woods to investigate, they only found 1 child clinging to a tree and crying. Now I'm going to fast forward for 20 years. There happens to be a fellow named Bob Ryan who has just joined the Dublin Murder Squad. Guess what? He was that found 1 child during that murder, and he wanted to keep his secret a past. However, he and his colleague were asked to help to investigate, and it takes a very wonderful turn, and you will enjoy the characters. And there are 6 books in Tana French's Dublin Murder Squad. The last author I'd like to introduce you to is Camilla Lackberg. Camilla Lackberg is famous for her Erica Falk and Peter Hedstrom series. She's also one of the most prolific and well-loved authors in Sweden. It happens to be that Erica is moving back to her resort town where she grew up, called Falljaka in Sweden. Well, she came back and her town had changed, but she could understand that. However, she was came upon a crime of her childhood friend, and this was very concerning to her. And as she was looking into that crime, she met Peter Hedstrom, who was a police detective, and together they worked to solve the crime. This book has 6 books in its series, and each one develops a relationship among Peter and Erica and the people that live in the town. The next book I'd like to talk about is a standalone mystery. It's called Defending Jacob by William Landay. Andy Barber had been a prosecutor in his town in Massachusetts for 20 years. One day, a boy is found murdered, and Andy suspects that it must be the neighborhood pedophile that must have done it. So he starts an investigation, but his investigation is lagging. And then there happens to be some conflicts of interest. It seems that Andy's son Jacob knew the murdered boy, But that's not all. Jacob's best friend tells secrets about Jacob, and Jacob is arrested for the boy's murder. Andy, his father, swears on his son's innocence, and he's out to prove it. The last books I have are real life mystery books. These are true crime. And I'm going to begin with Dirty Doc Ames and the Scandal That Shook Minneapolis. It's written by Eric Rivness. And if you've ever toured the gangster tours down in St. Paul, he is the man that started those gangster tours. Well, Dirty Doc Ames is actually kind of a very affable fellow. And he once was mayor of Minneapolis, but he dupes the city again to become mayor of Minneapolis. And this time, he appoints his brother the chief of police. He and his brother gather together a gallery of thieves whose main mission is to extort as much money from the city as they can. Those thieves walk the beats dressed up in police uniforms. The police are actually extorting money from madams and saloon keepers, and are looking the other way because they know what they're doing is illegal. And there are prosecutors that are not listening to the people that they need to help, but they're taking in some money. However, during a bad card game and a complaint to the newspaper, the whole scheme is ruined. Doc Ames fled Minneapolis, and Minneapolis is able to take back their city. The next book I have is called The Wicked Boy by Kate Summerscales. Kate Summerscales won the Edgar Award for this book, and the Edgar Award means that if she was nominated by her peers, and then there's a winner, and she happened to get that in late 1990s. In the late 1990s. Now, this story reads like a novel. It begins with Robert Combs, who is a 13-year-old boy, and his brother, Natty, who's 12 years old. They were arrested for the murder of their mother. This takes place in Victorian times in the 1890s. And the judge rules that Robert, the older brother, was responsible for his mother's death, and the judge ascends him to the most infamous lunatic asylum in the land. It's called Broadmoor. At Broadmoor, Robert changes his life, finds new beginnings. And what else is special about this book is that the author has done extensive research into the Victorian times and can discuss Victorian prejudices, economic conditions, political conditions, the culture as it was at that time. It's riveting and it reads like a Dixonian novel. The last real murder book I have is called Say Nothing, written by Patrick Keefe, who is a staff writer on the New Yorker magazine. In 1972, a woman named Jane McConville was interrupted at her own home by masked intruders, and they just took her away from the home with 10 children screaming on her and hanging onto her legs. They never saw their mother again. Now, the people around the area knew that the IRA was responsible, but because there was such paranoia and fear, no one would speak up about it. Patrick O'Keefe went back to find out what actually happened. And it seems as if it was during the time of the Troubles, and I know that you have heard of the Troubles. And he does a great job of going back and explaining what that was. I knew very little about the Troubles. I learned a lot, and I loved the book. Well, I hope that some of those books will entice you to get cozy, have your own Jokerblood at home, and you know, it's still cold, wintry nights, even though Christmas Eve is past. Look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Thank you.